Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for our webinar, 4 Ways to Adapt Building Design in the Post-COVID Era. We've got a bunch of great content for you today, lots of stuff to cover from our panel of experts. Before we do that, we'll just go over a couple quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature of Zoom webinar, which is down at the bottom next to the chat. Some questions we'll be able to respond to live at the end if we have some extra time, but our panel of experts will be in the Q&A and we'll be able to respond to some questions right there during the presentation as well. So since we've got quite a bit of stuff to go over today, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon to kick things off. Shannon?
All right, thank you, Andy. Let me get this up. All right. Hi, everyone, and good morning. My name is Shannon Schmelt, and I am an AEC technical specialist here at Autodesk. I will be presenting alongside Daniel Bayer, David Graves, and Edmundo Herrera 4 ways and different tools that you can use to help adapt building designs for safety. So today we're going to start out just briefly talking about a pressing issue in the industry and some of the implications before we'll dive into 4 practical applications and different tools to show you some of the ways that you can work within the new constraints. We'll do a quick recap at the end, and as Andy mentioned, we'll have a little bit of time, hopefully at the end, for some Q&A. So to start, one of the biggest issues in the AE industry, in addition to all of everything going on right now with COVID, is not only that requirements are changing, but that they're changing fast and they're changing often. So these are just a few of the recommendations set forth by the CDC. And as you can see, the recommendations are being updated regularly, and the recommendations vary by industry. So it's a challenge to keep up with all of the data. The design and construction industry has a presence in some capacity with all industries and typologies. So this is really creating an overload of information and an endless cycle of modifications. So the big question really is, how do we adapt to face the challenges ahead? And first, it's about understanding what we can do. The NIOSH has released a hierarchy of controls as it relates to hazard prevention that narrows from the most effective to the least effective. However, as our industry does not have the knowledge or background focused on eliminations and vaccines of the virus, and the virus, it's not something that we want to find a substitution for, what we're going to be focusing on is how processes and tools can be implemented to help with engineering controls, administrative controls, and providing PPE. So as we work through the session today, we will be showing how various workflows and tools support meeting these control measures. Next, we need to establish an efficient method of working. We can be successful by taking the right references and resources as issued by varying agencies such as NIOSH, CDC, OSHA, WHO, AIA is coming out with things, and many more, and putting this information into a sustainable process. And a sustainable process is going to be one that's repeatable. It's a repeatable workflow that will help drive efficiency, and one that's going to lead with data decisions and give you analytical insights. Science is dictating a lot of design, engineering, and operational requirements, so we need to be able to make these decisions and push the design based on science. We also need to support our processes by having the right tools. So in order to meet the requirements of driving decisions through data, the tools must support data inputs. It's also going to be in your benefit if you're operating in connected platforms, so you maintain data integrity and avoid rework as you complete your work across industry. So before we jump into the processes and tools, I just want to set the framework for what we're about to explore. We're going to be looking at one project and exploring how 4 different tools can support redesigning for safety from the design phase all the way to facilities and maintenance. I'm going to be starting the discussion in the design phase, looking at the way that generative design can optimize design and create efficient workflows. Before we get into the product and workflow, I do want to touch briefly on generative design and just highlight a new release from Autodesk because there might be members in the audience who aren't familiar with it. So at a very high level, generative design is about optimizing design goals by taking data inputs, reading the data, the goals, and the constraints through an algorithm and writing the outcome to a project. So it's about reading and writing, and what your output is, it could be a floor plan, it could be a facade, it could be a lighting layout, but you're going to generate many different options that you can then make an optimal choice because you get the data behind how each option performs. So this process, it relies on programming to translate the data. And Dynamo is Autodesk's visual programming language, and historically running generative design studies meant users were working solely within Dynamo. However, in the AEC collection of 2021, Autodesk introduced a new tool, which is the Generative Design for Revit tool. And it's really just a user interface that allows designers to run generative design studies without having to engage in the programming interface and all of the programming language that we just saw on the previous screen. So this user interface is what we're going to be looking at today in order to understand how generative design can meet the needs of redesigning for the era of COVID. All right, and now I'm going to jump over to the product and we'll take a look at how this can operate. So what I have open here is just a typical office building with a floor plan. And I've opened up my FF&E plan, and you can see that I have absolutely no furniture, fixtures, or equipment. So I have to redesign based on the new criteria. And there's a lot of rooms, it's multiple stories, that can be a pretty big task, especially as we talked about when information is constantly changing. However, there we go. What we have under this Manage tab, you can see this generative design. It's grayed out right now because I have it already launched, but this is that new tool that will make this a lot easier for you. When you open it up, you're going to have the option to create and select a study type. And these are all out of the box, included with the download and install of Revit 2021 from the collections. And I'm going to show you how we can take the workspace layout and modify it based on COVID criteria. So I'm selecting this workspace layout, and you can see that it's really just a series of prompts. So I can give this a name, so it's going to be office layout. We'll do it for Office 302. And I select a method. I'm going to leave it at the optimize method. And that's going to try to, as it says, optimize all of the different options based on the inputs. And everything else, it's basically just going to be a Q&A for you. So I want to select a room and tell this study where we're looking. I'm going to do that. And it's also asking for a desk family. Now, when we think about how this operates in the era of COVID, I know that this script and this algorithm, just from working with it before, it's going to create a benching layout. So it's stacking these desks end on end for high density. And when we think about safety and we think about social distancing, that might not be something that we want. So we have a couple of different options on how we can work with this. The first is we can modify the script. Everybody is going to have access to this. If you have the generative design tool, you have access to the algorithms that it's running on. So you could go in and edit it. The other option is just to edit the family itself. And so that's what I've done here, is instead of just pushing the desks at end to end, I've built in a clearance area for this desk. So there's a little bit of space added to the end of it. So now when it's end to end, I know that I have that buffer zone. And that's just an easy way to still use and not have to modify any of the programming, but still getting a little bit of extra space. So I select this desk. And here I have some variables. So I'm going to leave these checked because, sure, we can rotate the desk row orientation. And yes, the spacing between the rows can vary. And we're going to set some goals. So previously, when we talked about average distance to exits in terms of architectural terms, it was something that you might want to try and minimize just for ease of access, user experience. Talk about travel distance and egress paths. We want those to be lower. However, when we now think about this goal in the era of COVID, an exit is a point of high touch. It's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of people going in and out, so you might not want to be close to it. So we can use these goals and these constraints to help us modify that. So before, like I said, we might have wanted to minimize it. Now, maybe we don't want to maximize it, but maybe we want to minimize it and start to refer back to those references and the resources on what they recommend. So maybe we want to minimize it, but no closer than 15 feet for the average occupant, or maybe no closer than 10 feet. Whatever the industry is the resources are recommending for the industry you're working on. Views to outside, I can leave as a goal. It's just a nice to know, but it's not really going to alter my decision in terms of finding the best plan. And number of desks. Again, previously we wanted high density. We wanted to maximize our floor plan and our footprint. But now that might not be a good thing. So I can leave this on maximize, but I can set a cap. So I can say no more than 50 desks. And maybe that's what I know that all of the support spaces, such as the toilet rooms and the break rooms, it can support this office carrying a load of 50 people. So I don't want to go over that. And from there, I'm really just going to tell the generative design tool how many different plans we want, and I'm going to hit generate. It will take maybe 2 to 5 minutes to come up with the option, but because we're trying to show you 4 tools in an hour, we're not going to spend those 2 to 5 minutes. And instead, I'm going to cancel out of here, and we're going to look at some of the studies that I've already run. So this is the same office layout, and you can see I have 30 different plans, and I can sort these by average distance to exits. Right now, let's sort it by the highest spacing or the highest average distance to exit, because we want to start with people farther away and move down with people closer. I could also sort it by the spacing between rows. Same thing, let's look at the rows that are farther apart first, and then start to explore maybe some options that are closer together. And that's one way that we can start to look at this. The other way, and this is where we start to talk about that optimization aspect, is when I come to the bottom here, I can filter all of these categories. And so again, distance is king right now. So maybe I only want to see the rows that are farthest apart. And once I apply that filter, it's going to remove all other options. And again, average distance to exits. I just want to see the ones that are farther from the exits. And those 2 simple filters leave me with 2 options left out of 30 as being my best performers. And when I click on these, I'm going to get all of that data and reporting that went into it. So I can see what the average distance to the exit is for a worker. And I can also see my number of desks. So I'm about 14 feet away and I have 39 people. This option, you can see I'm actually, the average person is farther away from an exit and I have more desks. And so we can make a decision based on this information, or this is a small little workflow tip that excites me, but you know, small things win. You can make a design option, open up a design option set and hit edit. And when you hit create Revit elements, it's going to put those desks into the design option for you. So you can take both of these options forward for the next phase when we start to talk about analytics of how air moves through the space and how people move through the space. So you're not making the decision in a bubble. The other benefit that we're going to gain from generative design as we're starting to redesign a lot of spaces and do a lot of layouts is I can look at this room very quickly with an algorithm and see what works. And I can also look at this room again with these operable partitions closed using that same algorithm and start to explore these options. And not only this room, but I can look at every single room in this office building. So this open office over here, I can generate layouts using that same technique, filtering down, understanding how each option performs, and quickly generate new layouts that are going to have those controls in place. All right, so now we're going to look at the next step, and I'm going to give it to Edmundo, who is going to show us some of the other considerations that we need to look at instead of just where people sit, but how people move.
Thanks, Shannon. While we are transitioning over to Edmundo, I just wanted to launch a quick poll and get a sense of the experience that the audience is having in having any upcoming projects that require some redesign or interventions to accommodate these guidelines. So I've got this poll up right now. We're going to keep this live for about 30 seconds or so, and then I will show you what the results are. And then after each section, we are also going to ask one more quick poll question if you'd like to get any more information about this project or about this solution from Autodesk. So it looks like we've got about 50% of the people voting so far. Give it just a few more seconds to get a sense of see how high we can get it here. Let's see here. Looks like quite a bit of interest so far. Give it about 5 more seconds for you to get your answers in. We're coming up on about 65% of people responding. All right, let's go ahead and share the results here with you so you can see that looks like lots of folks do have something planned, and even more are starting to have some conversations about it. So certainly this is top of mind for everybody. One more quick poll before we go into Edmundo's section here. If you'd like to get more information about generative design in Revit from Autodesk, you can just let us know right here, and then we'll keep this poll up for about 30 seconds or so, and then we will move on to the next section. So thanks, Shannon, for giving us that demo. Edmundo, we'll give it about maybe 10 more seconds here, and then we will end this poll and move on into the InfraWorks section. All right, I'll give it about 5 more seconds for you to get your answers in. Getting close to the end here. All right, great. Thank you very much. All right, Edmundo, please take it away.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. My name is Edmundo Herrera. I am a civil engineer. I'm licensed in the state of Florida, and it's a pleasure being here with you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at now is, as part of your AEC collections, there's a software called InfraWorks. And in InfraWorks, there's a very important tool called mobility simulation. Shannon has demonstrated, how many people we can, fit into a room, respecting, honoring the social spacing. But there's no way we can cram all the people at once. Otherwise they would have been already exposed. So you got to plan ahead. The same procedure, is valid in, we've done many cases for airports, for retail stores, for reopening schools, office buildings, hospitals, and even mass transit, okay? So I guess, if you're familiar with InfraWorks, you just build a model, pretty much a model of what you're interested. If you don't have, the data, you can automatically select a part of the world where it is. It's going to give you the configuration, the basic configuration, where you can import the model that Shannon was, analyzing. And then from here, under InfraWorks, you go to, under Analyze, you go straight to Mobility Simulation. Mobility Simulation, it takes you right to the area that you want to start analyzing. Again, you have to do this. You have to use micro simulation. So this is based on, the gap acceptance lane changing algorithm. You have to really plan ahead on how people are going to be moving into the building, what times, everything. So having said this, all you have to do is, right click, and then you move to mobility simulation. Okay, once you do this, and it is, I am importing a Revit model into the InfraWorks model. Go straight, you can see it right here up at the top. It's mobility simulation. That's where it is. And then there's no restrictions whatsoever. It is always best practices in micro simulation to know the existing conditions. So we're going to be studying right now only the existing conditions. the way people randomly arrive into a building. We'll move into the safety guidelines provided by CDC in a second, okay? But always, it's always great to understand what happens. So this is just, at random, it's a Revit model, but it's far from being just pure graphics. These are very complex math done in a very simplistic way where, you can immediately get results. That visual feedback is exactly what you're after. Look at this. So you're modeling, okay, and under existing conditions, people arrive from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And that's what you're seeing right here, arriving from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then what am I doing in order to understand, the behavior a little bit better? I'm assigning unique colors per floor. So people on the first floor will have different, colors than the rest of the, of the remaining floors. So you have all the, the physics, the length, the width, and the spacing that you want to do. It has a south entrance, Shannon showed it, a north entrance. And then once you start running simulation, you can see all the results, being dynamically updated, okay? Here, using the Revit model, I can even change in views and then start analyzing as people move in, okay? So yeah, the information can be globally understood from the dynamic output report, or you can even select an agent like I'm doing here, like a person, and it tells you exactly what is the waiting time, what is the walking time, and then the type of person that's arriving at any point. So they're graphically dynamically updated. Okay, now you can even take it a step further. Based on the Revit model, you can also include elevator simulations. It includes what? The passengers, the capacity, when is the next the trip going to be scheduled. Every single element that relates to the elevator, you can see it. And then right here, you simulate, and you start seeing people getting off on the second and the third floor. So these are the existing conditions. And of course, not only the visual feedback, the immediate visual feedback, you can obtain it from simulation. You can also create and generate Excel reports. Once you do that at any interval, you can certainly do it. Now, this is fine, this is great, but what happens, and then let me go straight to the micro simulation, and this is to the product itself, live demo. These are the new conditions, the new safety guidelines. So rather than people arriving randomly, what you do is right now establish different terms. Okay, since I cannot just, and you can, running the simulation based with the existing conditions, you can see people already, not honoring the social spacing. So what you must do is plan ahead. Okay, so I've got different, different schedules per different floors. So I'm gonna make some arrive before, and then for how long must you do it? So you have to understand that you have to organize the groups, you have to stagger them, and that's called, computing the frequency on how often would the groups be released. Okay, so that's the staggering schedules you have to compute, and they must always be validated for. Again, under here, you've got your own type of person, first floor, second floor, and again we set the physics. What is the length, the width, the height, and of course the spacing. But once I hit the spacing, this is critical because now I must honor it. And then you can even, start running the simulation, look at the clock, and, instead of what, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. starts right here at 7 a.m. And as soon as you hit, play, you can start seeing, different, the first floor being occupied. Now here, if I switch, to the entrance, I can zoom in and I can keep on playing the simulation. Look at this. Now they line up. You just can't, not from the door capacity, it's not going to give you, exactly, the ingress times. No, you have to compute, you have to align them in a single line right now in order to have control and honor social space. And once you do that, you can start seeing that now they start, separating themselves. Again, okay, that's, that's the entrance. And also wanted to show you this, that, as part of the new security guidelines, you must always avoid two-way traffic whenever possible. And in order to do this, well, I have a demand that I must satisfy, of course, and I leave the entrance, the south entrance open, but I shut down the north entrance right here to avoid, two-way traffic. Once I do that, I also open these two, wings, the exits that I have on both wings, so that people on the left wing occupy only the left side of the building. People on the right wing only occupy the right side of the building, and the main entrance is open for the front part of the building. So if I simulate, I can certainly, even just, slow them down, okay? Once I do that, and then, these are the alternate exits. And of course, if I see it on a plan view, I can see that stochastically. That means, based on probability, a demand, not everyone's going to be arriving at the same time. I can certainly understand this. And on the main side, on the main inside, look at this. You can even import, your own 3ds Max characters into the building. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, the way they look. They look fine, but the physics and the mathematics are maintained here, where, it gives you the walk-in time, the waiting time, and everything in between. Now you can see that 732, and that's, the simulation that's also needed. Okay, now you can even follow any agent. If I, select this agent to be followed, I can, track it. And then, as I run the simulation, I can see, right here, the way, the person is moving, okay? Now, okay, I'm gonna escape from this. Okay, here, there it is. And then go back and change my view here, and then good. And then as soon as there's no people occupying the elevator. Why is this? Because, of course, at 7:38, I said from 7 to 7:50 that everyone was going to be just occupying the first floor. Now, if I speed up the simulation, fast forward it to 7:50, and you can see different types of icons being assigned to each person as you simulate. I am going back, and then once you start going into the second, the second set of elements, now they either walk up the stairs. The capacity of the elevator is reduced. Instead of, from 8 people only to 2 people. You can see that you have control, and everything is dynamically updated. Now, one thing you always have to be careful is to check the levels of service, the levels of service of walkways. I told you, yes, this is immediate visual feedback on a very complex problem made in in extremely simplistic manner, because you get always the visual feedback. No matter what happens, you can start reviewing once people start getting close to each other, and then you always have to be justifying the spacing, reviewing throughout the entire simulation. So levels of service S, that's not the velocity, but S is the spacing in between. So you always have to be extremely careful about this. And of course, you can speed it up and then analyze everything as it is. So you can see that the north doors being used in all the entrances are also automatically open, so for you to start understanding, and then always provide this social spacing based on on the calculations that Shannon presented. Okay, well, that's what I wanted to show. I am going to turn it over to Dave now.
Thanks so much, Edmundo. We'll go ahead and launch another quick poll question here while we are transitioning screens. So if you'd like to get any more information from Autodesk about mobility simulation InfraWorks, just go ahead and answer this poll question here. We'll keep it open for about 30 seconds. Looks like we do have some Q&A coming in right now in the Q&A box. I remind everybody, if you have any questions, please feel free to use that Q&A box. If we have time at the end, we will get to those questions and answer them live. If it looks like we are going to run out of time, then we will start to just put some answers in there by typing them in. All right, give it about 5 more seconds here on the poll question, and then we will turn it over to Dave. All right, looks like we're slowing down, so I'll go ahead and turn that off. All right, Dave, take it away. Looks like you're on mute still, Dave.
Sorry. Hey, thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Dave Graves. I'm actually a mechanical engineer. And I want to talk to you about, you saw Edmundo talk about how to get people safely in the building, interacting in the building. Well, once they're in this workspace, how can we do things to mitigate things like the spread of a COVID-19? So on the screen is the same Revit model that we've all been working with, and that's kind of the key. We can use one kind of common truth of data to start doing this, and we can bring this data directly into our CFD tool. And it looks something like this, and CFD is for computational fluid dynamics. Basically, we're going to be able to visualize the flow inside of the building. I know typically people use things like asteroid calculations, which are great. This is just going to give you another level of detail to really explore how efficient your HVAC system may be, or other things, or desk layout and people interaction. If you haven't seen CFD, most people think of it as a pretty daunting exercise, but it's really pretty straightforward with our solution. Basically, when the model's in, you're going to work left to right. So the first thing we do is we assign materials. So I have some air volumes here inside of the building. Here's an airspace. What's really nice is if your model is airtight in Revit, we automatically create the fluid path for you. Once we set our materials, we just follow this ribbon kind of left to right on the screen. So what are our boundary operating conditions? So in this case, maybe I could put something like a flow rate in here. We can talk about doing things with contaminants in a little bit, but what do I know about the building and how it's going to perform? Typically for returns, we'll just have it open atmosphere, but you could have a closed loop system. It's definitely within the capabilities of the tool. But once I run these results, and now we're actually able to start visualizing the flow paths in here. And this is one of the critical things. I think it's really easy to start looking at what the air inside of this building is doing. Here, let me change this view for a second. This perspective gives us a nice little viewpoint. You can kind of see where the air is flowing, and these are something called particle traces. They just kind of trace the air throughout the entire systems. Just to show you some of the other capabilities we have as far as visualization is a lot of people will use something called just a cut plane through here, much like a section view that you might have inside of Revit if you're doing cross sections. But here's a plane, and I can take this plane and we can slide this and move this anywhere in the model. There's my glyph here, so I can kind of see what the velocity looks like if it's coming out of those diffusers, what it looks like over the desk and things like that. We can go ahead and put some vectors on here if you want to see the direction of it. Second here. There you go, you can kind of see some vectors. And again, you can have multiple planes, you can change the spacing, we can look at different quantities. Anywhere in this model, if I look kind of here in the bottom left-hand corner, as I move my mouse over, I can get real numbers, so I can get qualitative and quantitative information out of this model. When we start talking about COVID in general and contaminants and pollutants, one of the tools we have is something called an ISO surface. And one of the quantities you're probably familiar with is looking at the local mean age of air. So I know we look at our asteroid calculations and we kind of get an estimate for what that's going to be. But if I want to dig in deeper, what I can do in this case is I can shade any particular model at a given range. So by the way, this is in seconds. It's really easy to go over and convert on the fly to something like hours if I was looking at certain hours. And then as I slide this in here, I notice, maybe overall my calculations, I'm going to meet all the criteria. But if you notice, this corner of the room is pretty bad, right? There's maybe no return over here. We're getting a lot of recirculation. By the way, another thing you can do is if you want to see the visuals of this, you can get 3D vectors really easy by turning this on. Something that I like to do just to kind of visualize what the flow looks like in that area. You can see it's kind of doing a lot of swirl here. The beauty of our CFD tools, what if I made a change? So in this case, I had, maybe a complicated 2 sets of air conditioning duct work here. What if I went and I did this as a single one? So you can see, here's the original one that I have, and what I can actually do, again, using the same model, is kind of compare those two. So I can see how I can reduce that potential risk of recirculation in the area, which should give me some healthier, cleaner air for my occupants to be immersed with. If I want to dig in and do some deeper things, like I want to look at potentially how airflow or how something, someone coughs, this is a school environment, but same thing, someone sneezes, someone's talking hard, they're breathing heavy, we can use these particle traces. And what's really nice is if you wanted to, you could assign mass and gravity to them, and you can see in this case, the person in front of the other person is maybe something at risk. Well, the beauty is maybe I can put something like a little filtration unit in here, and you can see that is going to pull the contaminants away from the person in front of them. So I can explore different things like that. Maybe I can look at different desks as well. So if I'm in this office environment, right, this is an area where these, maybe they're closer than they should be, have no choice, but there's no dividers in this desk. Well, what if I just put a simple divider in the desk? What happens? So I can do these comparisons. What's really nice is I can actually even do these kind of side by side if I wanted to. So you see me kind of pan through these, but if I wanted to, I could actually compare these side by side and see. So any of these changes I can explore long before I have to physically build or change anything, whether it's a rework or a new building. I know when I go out in the field and I actually spend money to upgrade something, it's gonna work the first time. And again, just some other quick things we can get into is, if you look at this, you can explore different things like spacing and things like that. So you can see these people are maybe 6 feet, they're maybe 4 feet. You can see potentially where contaminants go. Edmundo mentioned something where people, you don't want to go the same way in a building. You can kind of see the flow paths that these people come into this building as well. So we can evaluate a lot of complicated things like that as well, if that's the level of detail that you want to get into. So we could spend a lot of time on this. I'm glad if anyone wants to learn more, just reach out and we're glad to spend a little more. But with that, I'm conscious of time. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Daniel.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. While we're switching over again, we're going to launch a quick poll question. We had a question in the Q&A. Is there any way to follow up with any of the presenters? The best way to get in touch with us is to just let us know here that you'd like to have a little bit more information about one of these solutions, and then someone from our team will be able to get in touch with you and have a conversation about it. So I've got the poll live now. If you're interested in learning more about computational fluid dynamics, just go ahead and answer the poll question here. We'll go ahead and give it about 15 more seconds, and then looks like we've got looks like we may have a little bit of time here at the end to answer a couple of questions. So encourage you to continue to use the Q&A box if you have any questions, so that we can get to as many of those as we can here after the presentation. All right, give it just a couple more seconds here on the poll. All right, I'll go ahead and end it. All right, Daniel, go ahead and take it away.
All right, appreciate it, Andy. And hello, everyone. I'm continuing on this story, this journey that we've been on through the building from design, and now really starting to dig a little bit deeper into maybe some site visits in the facility and across the team, and really extending visibility into the data, building in a little more accountability into the overall process, and really managing all this information in a fully integrated method within this project. So what you're seeing right now on my screen is it has been 360 document management, and we're going to be looking at document management. We're also going to be looking at field management this morning, as well as some of the analytics and insight and reporting. So to begin, how can you really leverage the data and share information? And so what I'm going to do is open a PDF right inside of document management. And when we open that up, we have some really interesting markup tools. So we can navigate to, say, a page. You might want to add a markup. And it's not just a markup that we're going to add on this page. It's going to be so much more than that, because when we say cloud in area, we can modify some of the information about what that cloud might look like, or what this markup might look like. And it's always going to be retained. When I save this markup, it's going to be retained within, and that is the integrity side of all of the data. So we can see the different markups on all the different pages. But what we can do to extend this capability is we can use our issues tool. And with issues, we can really create more of that accountability approach on the project. So you can define what it belongs to. It would be an issue type. And I like to define issues as really just questions. It's questions that you don't want to lose track of. You can eliminate the multiple files, Excel files that you may have used in the past. And now you can really just open this up to one location to manage all that information. You can give it just a simple title, and then you can assign that to an individual in the team that's within BIM 360. Choose a date if you need a response back for that, and then other data that you can define. So I can create that, and now I've got a pin that can always take me right back to this location inside of document management. So you have that full visibility of all your information always accessible, and we can see the issues that show up on that left side of the dialog box, and we can jump to any of those issues at any time and look at that data. So continuing to move on downstream into field management. So where I'm going to go is to field management, and you can see a variety of the modules that we have available to us. And I've got a window already open in field management. And a couple of things I want to talk about. You know, how can you start to use some of the AIA forms and pull those into BIM 360? I'm going to show that example. You can also look to OSHA or really any of the other safety. On our Autodesk site, we've got a safety checklist as well for housekeeping, say in a hotel environment. So all of that's available to you. So I'm going to begin with the templates, and we can bring those templates in via Excel. They can come in from our classic field, or you can create your own template. And we also have a template sample, and I'm going to open that up right now. So here is this sample that gets downloaded. You just simply replace the information and then pull that new one up. Here is a template that I created based on some of the AIA reoccupancy assessment information. And this is not all inclusive. I did about 5 sections out of that assessment, and we're going to open that up right now. So what I'm going to do is, so I have a template here. We can see it. I can create the checklist. I can assign it to someone. Or I can jump into a checklist that I've already set up. And in this one, I'm going to open up. We have the different sections that have been created. I'm going to go into section 3, where we really start to cover a lot of the big questions about where you're beginning. You know, what does programming look like? What does the beginning of design kind of look like? And the unique capability about this is that you can produce reporting on it, which I'm going to take us to shortly, but you can begin to ask the questions as well. So as you work through that checklist, some things may be essential, some things may be desired. You can make a second pass into it. You can even add implemented. It was desired and implemented. Or you can choose, say, an item that's not been implemented, and you have that ability to create an issue or ask the question. There is also an auto feature built into checklists that would auto create an issue once you click a non-conforming item. But if I'm going to create an issue, I can just simply initiate it. It's pulling up the reoccupancy violation type that we've created, and we can always change that. We can give it a name, or it's going to choose the name of that checklist item by default. And we can go back into reassigning this and choosing a date as well. When we create that, well, actually prior to creating that, I also want to show one of the new unique features we have in our checklist, where we can add or link a document. And so I can reach out into, say, a model, and I'm going to go into design. I'm going to go into architecture, and I'm going to select a model, and we're able to drop a pin on that location. So right now it's surfacing the model, and because I hadn't refreshed my screen, it's refreshing itself, and it's going to pull up this model. Oops, it did not create that. Let me go down and hit that one more time, create that issue, because it didn't need to refresh. I've been sitting here for about 45 minutes to an hour, and now I'm going to go back in and add this design, architecture, and the pin select. So we're going to see that it's opening up the Revit model, and we're going to come into it. And it's asking me to place the pin. So it's going to pull up that 3D. And you'll also see that we've got the 2D sheets associated, so anything that's been placed. I'm going to place a pin. It's been initiated, and it's connecting itself back into the checklist. So in this case, you would have gone out to an appropriate sheet, an appropriate view in the model, and you would have dropped that pin. I'm just simply dropping it based on opening up the model. I hit done, and then I continue to fill out the remainder of the information. And what we have with, all of this information, the integrity of all this information being held within this one place, it's also going to be deposited into our overall issues list. So not only do we have the checklist that can be pushed out to reports, we also have the issues that I've also had a window open for that we can go to and very quickly sort and filter out, say, specific checklists that we might want to view within our list. So here we have the COVID. It's going to filter out those lists. And again, my window has been sitting here, so it's just refreshing itself. We're going to see the issues pop up. And when that refilters, I'm going to do that one more time because of the refresh. Go down to the COVID, and we'll now see those sorted and filtered. So from here, we could do a direct export. So you could send out a CSV or a PDF report, and it's going to be this filtered version. As we look deeper downstream into the reporting capabilities, we've got analytics and insight, one of the unique kind of cornerstones of BIM 360, where all of the information that's being captured is also being surfaced here in our insight module, in the visibility of it. And we have an overall risk. We've got design specific. We've got project control, schedule, quality, and I'm on the safety. And all of this is customizable with our card library. And within that card library, we have multiple pre-built different reports that we can pull out, as well as some of the custom or external partner cards. So what are some of the output look like? We're able to go downstream even further into reports. And I should also mention that when we send out reports, you can pull those direct, or you can share those reports internal to BIM 360 or external by just simply plugging in an email address. When you set up the reports on an auto extracted or auto reported methodology, you can add in external recipients of those reports as well. So you may want reports to be sent out to your customers and clients. Some of the reporting capabilities, here's just a summary report of issues that have been created. This is that look and feel of what you're going to receive, and it's going to be color coded based on the current status. And then in a detailed report of a checklist, this is what that's looking like. So you're going to have, all of your conforming, non-conforming items identified. And again, this is a full detailed report out, where it will also have hyperlinks back into the information. And now I showed this on the desktop version or in the web browser on my PC, but certainly all of this capability exists for the mobile device. In fact, it was mobile first around this capability, and functions with walking the job site, snapping photos, and very quickly analyzing your facility. All right, so we are going to move on back to Shannon.
Thanks, Dave. Before we move on to Shannon's wrap up, we've got one more quick poll question here for everybody to answer. If you'd like to get a little bit more about using BIM 360 for the safety checklist or for anything else that you have seen in Daniel's presentation today, just go ahead and answer this poll question for us. That's the best way for us to be able to provide more information back to you. I'm going to give it about 15 more seconds here for you to answer the question, and then we will move on to Shannon. And then I think we will be able to answer the couple of questions also that came in. All right, so let's give about 5 more seconds here on the poll. Just let us know if you're interested in getting some more information about BIM 360. All right, looks like our responses are slowing down here, so I'll go ahead and turn that off. Go ahead, Shannon.
All right, thank you. So I just wanted to provide a brief recap of everything that we've talked about. We looked at 4 different tools that we can use, and they can integrate into an existing workflow that you may have, or I'm going to show you a proposed workflow on how they can all work together. But first, we started out with generative design for Revit, and really the purpose of this is data-driven design so that we can optimize for safety, and you can also repeat your process as the requirements change. Micro simulation in InfraWorks in how people move, so we can adjust when people enter and exit the buildings, the paths that people take, changing from 2-directional traffic to 1-directional traffic, and understanding, are we bettering people's interactions, and are we keeping them safe by making these changes? Dave showed us some CFD so that we're not just tracking people, where they sit and where they move, but the pathogens and where the air particles move. So we can start to look at air return rates in implementing filters. And he also showed some of that tracing as people move through traffic ways. And Dan concluded we looked at checklists. So how we can do QA, QC measures and implement some of the CDC, the AIA guidelines, making sure that our designs meet all of those requirements, and then also track the issues if they don't meet those requirements and see some of the reporting into that. So as we talk about a process, just to emphasize, it's always going to start with the background research. We need to be looking at the right resources, the right references, talking with the clients about what the scope of work is to be changed, the budget, the role of technology in creating a touchless environment. Also considering the control level of the space. Is it a shared office building or is it a standalone? All of these things are questions that need to be explored before we start diving into the tools. But from there, they really work hand in hand. We can redesign a spatial program, and then we can use that same model and that same design for analysis. So running those mobility simulations and running CFD to then get more data, more insight to go back and maybe make some tweaks to the design. And then again, analyze once more before we start to implement some QA, QC to check us along the way at different milestones and make sure that we're meeting those guidelines. And those checklists, they don't end in just assessing the guidelines, but it can be used for facility maintenance. So cleaning crews, are they meeting all of the requirements? So this is just a proposed workflow on how these tools can work together to help you work more efficiently, so that way you're able to help your customers. And Andy, that concludes the presentation portion. So like you said, we'll go into that Q&A.
Great, thanks so much, Shannon. A couple questions for the panel today. So the first one, Shannon, is for you. Can you say, so from Ursula, are there any are the colors an indicator of high, medium, low concentration of inactivity?
Right, so when we were looking at generative design, you saw the desks had like green to red type of gradient applied to them. And what that is indicating is just a really quick visual way that we understand that aspect of the views to outside. So the green means that occupant has high views to outside, there's windows near where they're sitting, and the red is there's obstructions, they might not have a window. So that's why we didn't really get into that, but it's just a quick visual reference for you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shannon. All right, looks like we have another question here for Edmundo. So Edmundo, for a workplace in which people move around significantly during the course of work like a machine shop, could you still use the mobility simulation software to see how people should move around?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. You can schedule, the times that they should, arrive. Also, you can also schedule the exit. We just saw the incoming flow. You can schedule the outgoing flow, and also you can also concentrate on every single break that they should take, and also build the pathways so that they move in safely. So for all those conditions, yes, you can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Edmundo. Looks like one coming in here from our colleague, Luis. Dan, would you like to talk a little bit more about the pictures and other items you can add to this checklist reports in BIM 360?
Yes, absolutely. So we do have that ability to upload or attach or connect any information back into those checklists. And really an ideal scenario is, say, walking a job site, walking a facility, and capturing information through just, through your notes, through issues, and connecting other documents back into, say, questions that have been part of or listed out within the checklist. So all of that information can be added, and it can be added during, say, a facility walkthrough or assessment, or it can be added after the fact.
All right, great. Thanks, Daniel. So that looks like that's all the questions that we have in the Q&A box today. So thank you so much, Shannon, Edmundo, Daniel, and Dave, for sharing your expertise with us. If you answered one of the poll questions that you'd like to get some more information, you can keep an eye out for some contact from Autodesk coming to you. A recording of this webinar will be provided in email. Give us a few hours to get that email put together, and we will get that out to you. And in the meantime, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to your Autodesk account team at any time. Thanks so much for attending our webinar today. Have a great day.